There was once a boy at a train station. His name was Saroo Brierly. He was 5 years old and begging for food and money at a train station. He had been waiting for his brother to return from telling him to wait here a second when he got worried. He couldn't see his brother, and he was taking longer than expected, so he boarded a train to look for him, thinking that he must be aboard. He was 5 years old, and he didn't know any better. And so the train began to move out, and that was it. He was 5 years old in India in the 1980s, and there were no good methods of getting him home. The train took him far, far away, and that was that. He looked out of the windows of this train and saw a mysterious and unfamiliar landscape, one that would be burned into his mind for the rest of his life. He ended up at the massive Howrah railway station, 1,500 kilometers away from home, scared and alone. He scavenged for scraps of food and slept under train station seats for days before finally being taken to a police station. He was only 5 years old, and he didn't know enough about his town or family to find his way back. He was soon declared lost and adopted by a family in Hobart, Australia, a further 10,200 kilometers from home. Here's the thing though, Saroo Brierly did manage to see his mother again. Despite never remembering where he grew up or what his family name was, he had one thing left: the memory of the train tracks all the way down. The memory burned into the back of his retinas. Years later, as an adult, he found out about a little piece of technology called Google Maps. Immediately, he got to work. He found the Howrah railway station and began his search. He followed each train line to its point of termination before clicking back to the station to try a different route. And eventually, he found it. Familiar terrain that had been burned into his memory. He followed those train tracks all the way back home. And in the end, he found his mother again. During COVID, more and more people are looking for the joy of exploration in the digital world more often. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is a plane flying simulator, but it's so much more than that. Sure, in the game you do fly a plane, but the true majesty of the game comes from the fact that you fly a plane on Earth. Capital E Earth. Our Earth. The very ground that you stand upon right now, you can fly in the airspace above it in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. They used Bing Maps data and ported it into a flight simulator, and people have been going nuts about it online. People have been going on these digital pilgrimages to the countries they were born in, mountains they hope to one day climb, sights they've always wanted to see. And there's even an online mode where you can see other users flying around too. Usually, it's absurdly empty. You won't come across another plane for miles, given that it is indeed the entire Earth. But there are these hotspots, places where groups of people gather to all marvel at a sight together. The endpoint to a digital pilgrimage you are all on. It's truly beautiful. Then there's 2B2T, a Minecraft server of all things, and it is ugly and it is scarred. It's referred to as an anarchy server, which just means that it has absolutely no rules. Cheating and hacks are allowed. You can destroy other people's bases, just for fun. Sadly, you can harass people in chat. It's not a kind place. In fact, it's regularly bigoted and messed up in so many ways. But among the toxicity, there is a heart to it. Once you make it past the scarred landscape and destruction of the spawn area, you find these little pockets of humanity. I came across a small little farm someone had set up, but surrounding it was just hundreds of signs everywhere. People thanking the original creator of the farm for giving them some food in this barren wasteland. Someone had built a church next to it. Isn't that fitting? One of the first few places to have some humanity from spawn, we find faith. This Minecraft server is full of little things like that, but it also happens on a much larger scale. There are these pilgrimages to the world border 30 million blocks away. There are monuments to fallen factions and more. Each landmark is littered with a peppering of signs, people just signing off that they had been there. And each time I'm suddenly connected with a tiny fragment of someone from long before me, like two ships passing silently in the night. This seems to be an instinct we have, to simply pick a point on a map and just walk towards it, like a moth drawn to a flame. In fact, that's quite apt, for
Like a moth drawn to a flame, your wings will burn in anguish. Time after time.
Dark Souls is many things to me. This isn't the first, nor will it be the last time I talk about it on this channel, but playing Dark Souls is a pilgrimage too, both in the narrative of the game and in the meta-narrative of how we players interact with the games. First, culturally, Dark Souls is a pilgrimage. Dark Souls is kind of a rite of passage for many gamers, something that many see as something they must accomplish. To see the sight so many have seen, to feel connected to such a fundamental part of the gaming community. It's no coincidence that everything is described as the Dark Souls of this and that. It's because Dark Souls laid the foundations for much of what was to come in video games. To go back and play it is to engage in pilgrimage. Funnily enough, we see pilgrimage even in the literal narrative of Dark Souls 2. This is most evident in Dark Souls 1. The journey you take in the first game is explicitly a pilgrimage. At the very beginning of the game, you are told
That one day an undead shall be chosen to leave the undead asylum in pilgrimage to the land of the ancient lords. Lord.
Then you have to journey high up above and far down below to ring 2 bells of awakening, and journey to the homes of the gods. And for what purpose? To link the fire, to re-establish the connection to the past, to rekindle a fading connection to faith and humanity. The Undead Curse causes one to lose their humanity, and only by linking and connecting the bonfires can they kindle themselves to reconnect with their humanity. Not only that, but the bonfires they link are beacons of hope, reconnecting you with your faith in your own ability. The pilgrimage is a reinforcement of faith. So, Death Stranding. Where do I even begin? This game is everything I'm talking about in this essay. I guess I'll start with what I think this game is not. It's not a narrative-driven game. Now that might be seen as a hot take, I know, but hear me out. The internet got really confused about Death Stranding, and people even got angry when Hideo Kojima himself said he didn't really understand the narrative of the game he had written and directed. But I want to defend this position a little. I think I draw a very important distinction between narrative and story. Story is one of the only aspects of art that I think is shared across all artistic mediums. There is a reason we are called storytellers and not narrative tellers after all. Story encapsulates mood, theming, symbols, message, philosophy, and narrative. It's the culmination of everything a story is. Narrative is just a subcomponent. So when Kojima says he doesn't understand what's going on in the narrative either, I can forgive him for that, because I don't believe that was the focus of the game. And that's okay. Narrative is just one device that a storyteller can employ to tell a story. But Kojima decided to focus on themes and symbols in his game. Death Stranding is drenched, no, swimming in its symbolism. And the symbolism speaks to the story far more than the narrative does. So I've waxed lyrical about its symbolism long enough. What actually is Death Stranding about? If you've played it, you already know too well, because it certainly isn't subtle. It's about connections, and it's about a pilgrimage. It's difficult to not just list the various symbols and their meanings, because there are so many important ones, so I'll do my best. The primary topic of all the symbolism is society. In Death Stranding, America is broken and brought to its knees. Entire states have been destroyed along with the federation that is the United States of America. All that's left are cities here and there, dotted across the country. These cities in this post-apocalyptic America are called knots, as in a knot in a rope. There is Port Knot City, Lake Knot City, Central Knot City, etc. This is to represent the idea that communities are gatherings of people, and each person holds their own thread, a connection to their past and their journey. And so, when people come together and form connections with each other, it forms a knot. It's often said that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, but not if you form knots. Not if the strongest links twist around the weak ones to protect them, and in turn, receive protection for themselves. This is the principal form of interaction in the symbolic world of Death Stranding. Creating connections, tying knots, extending a thread, and tying the country together again. The physical component of this journey reflects the symbolic pilgrimage. It is tempting, especially for someone like me, to interpret a criticism of capitalism and the fact that people's middle and last names are the names of their jobs and companies they work for respectfully in Death Stranding. And as much as I do believe that there are anti-capitalist sentiments in the game, this is not one of them, I don't think. I believe this because Bridges, the company that our protagonist Sam Porter Bridges works with, is consistently framed as a family that helps each other. You can find the lost packages of other porters and help deliver them on their behalf, and they do the same for you. You lay down ladders and ropes across the map, not just for yourself, but for the other porters, and everyone contributes found resources to building roads, bunkers, and most importantly, bridges. Another aspect of pilgrimages is that they are often performed in order to strengthen one's faith in the particular cause they are pilgrimaging for. This is true too in Death Stranding. At the beginning of the game, Sam rejects the idea to rebuild America, and he sees his connection to bridges as shackles, for indeed shackles they appear to be. But for every refusal of the call, there is an acceptance thereafter. Sam learns that Bridges is an organization he can put his trust in, and he learns this not by staying behind at Central Knot City, but by journeying across America. It is on his pilgrimage that he learns firsthand the effects that Bridges is having. The change that Sam himself causes in the world is made abundantly clear to him, and he is consistently helped by other random people. He slowly becomes aware of the knot he is tying and being woven into. He realizes that societies crumble when people refuse to connect. When knots aren't tied, it becomes true that chains are only as strong as their weakest link. It is not an inherent fact about chains. Learning this is what shows Sam the importance of his pilgrimage across America. So what do we learn from all this? Pilgrimage is not exploration. Pilgrimage has a destination, a goal in mind, and yet that isn't the point. Where exploration is about focusing on a destination not yet even marked on a map, pilgrimage is about finding other threads on the way to a clearly marked destination. It is about strengthening one's faith. While it is true that pilgrimages are traditionally practices of worship, their focus is on how it changes the pilgrim. And finally, pilgrimages are about finding connections, building bridges, and weaving other people into what you have faith in. In journeying towards the destination, you carry with you a thread from where you started right to the finish line. And each connection you made along the way is another thread brought into the weave, brought into the knot. It is human, and it is good. And it's exactly what we need during a time where we are all losing faith and losing our interactions with each other. So we take to the digital world in pilgrimage.